Sorry, Your Honor, we're ready to proceed.
Okay. One moment.
Let's bring jurors, please. Further evidence for the state?
Yes, Your Honor. The state will call Deputy Simmons, Witt County Sheriff's Department.
Because that's kind of going around a bit. Maybe I'll do that too. That's 150.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Lively?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Deputy. If you would, please just introduce yourself to the jury and tell them how you're employed.
Brian Simmons, employed with the Wake County Sheriff's Office.
Yes, sir. And how long have you been employed with the Sheriff's Department?
I was hired in 2011.
And can you tell us how you're currently assigned?
Right now I'm assigned to the Patrol Division.
All right. And can you tell us how you were assigned on April 10th of 2014?
I was a K-9 handler in Special Operations Division.
And so we've heard some other folks testify from the Special Ops Division today. Is that correct? Is it Lieutenant Byrd and
Yes, sir.
Deputy Manville as well?
Yes, sir.
All right. And I believe the lieutenant was telling us about sort of the different things that Special Ops did, including the Special Response Team. He said he also saw the K-9 unit. Were you a K-9
Yes.
officer at that time?
I was.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about the training you underwent to do that, sort of what your roles and responsibilities were as a canine officer?
Sure. All of our canine training is done what we call in-house per se. So the 7 months I spent training my dog was all spent here in Wake County. We have what we call a training director on the canine unit. So we have a deputy whose sole job is to help train the dogs and to be responsible for training the dogs and the handlers as they come along through the training.
And so are you essentially assigned a particular dog to work with?
Yes, this sole dog lives with me. He comes home every day with me. It's the only dog that I handle. We don't pick and choose the dog we use on a daily basis. That sole dog lives with you.
Right. And you're also the only deputy that would handle that dog, is that correct?
Correct. Nobody else would use my dog. I wouldn't use anyone else's.
And you essentially go through 7 months of training with the dog to learn how to give commands and use them in investigations and searches and things of that nature.
Correct, depending on the dog.
Okay. So. Well, tell me about the dog that you were working with on April 14th. I'm sorry, April 10th.
German Shepherd, what's called a dual-purpose dog. So he was a patrol dog and a narcotics dog. So patrol functions would be tracking people, whether it be suspects that fled from the scene, a lost child, an elderly person. Tracking, apprehension, taking a suspect into custody, area searches, building searches, obedience, article searches, and then you have the narcotics section of that too. So that dog is certified to find multiple different narcotics.
Well, let's talk particularly about the tracking of people. Can you sort of tell me how you I'm sorry, what's the dog's name?
Duke.
Duke. How would Duke go about with your assistance in the tracking of people?
So the dog is trained to detect a human odor, not an animal, nothing foreign, human odor. What we call proofing dogs means throughout that 7 months of training, we will introduce the odor of deer, dogs, cats, all that through a track that we've laid human odor through. And that dog will recognize that odor of a deer or a cat and leave it and not go with it and go with that human odor, because we've taught that animal to not take that scent, but to take the scent of a human.
I see. Okay. And if Duke were to find a human scent, he would follow that?
Yes.
Okay. And would he alert you to finding that, or how would he kind of communicate with you about that?
Yes, it's called track acquisition. So that dog is brought into an area, take a field for example, that has human odor in it, and that odor went in this straight line, and I bring that dog and I introduce him into that odor. You're going to see his whole body change. You're going to see his head snap. You're going to see that nose go low to the ground. And this is a 90-pound shepherd that I have, and he's going to start pulling you. And he's going to say, and so you as a handler, your job is to be able to what we call reading a dog, knowing, hey, that dog just acquired that track, so go with it.
All right. And Deputy Simmons, when you were working for Special Operations back in 2010, would various folks that were either investigating crimes or needing to search articles, things of that nature, would they just make a request of you and you'd respond based on a request of anyone from the Sheriff's Department?
Correct. Anyone from the Sheriff's Office, any agency in this county, and I've traveled out of this county to assist other agencies. Not everyone has a canine unit. Not every agency in this county has a canine unit.
Yes, sir.
So.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the early morning hours of April 14th or April 10th of 2014. Were you on duty and employed in your capacity as a K-9 officer that evening?
Yeah, I was on call.
You were on call.
I was at my home.
Okay, so you were actually not on duty, but available if
Correct.
necessary for just this type of situation.
Correct.
Do you remember receiving a call that evening and going out to 3536 Holden Acres Drive?
I do. I initially responded to the Lake Glad address.
Okay, and do you know when you responded there?
I don't have the time at all. I don't recall.
So when you initially responded to the Lake Glad address, were there already several other people on scene and doing an investigation?
Yes, sir. There was multiple patrol units. I think investigations had probably already arrived. And yes.
And was any request of you made to search around the Lake Glad residence at that point?
I think initially that's what they called me for, and then it was learned that that the suspect may be in the Riley Hill area, and I was requested to go to that area.
And so as information is being developed, initially you're called out there, but once you've gotten there, basically they give you some new information that, hey, we don't think we need you here, but you may
Right.
want to go to this Riley Hill area.
Yes.
All right. And what was your understanding as to what you and Duke would be needed for that evening? What type of search?
Honestly, I thought it was probably going to be an article search, probably locating an item that was maybe used in the crime. When we got to the Holden Acres address, honestly, I was there to kind of assist the SRT team in anything that they needed.
Yes, sir. And so is Holden Acres Drive, is that part of what you refer to as the Riley Hills area of the county?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and were you familiar with that part of the county?
Yeah, I worked over there for about a year on patrol.
Okay, so you were able to find your way to Holden Acres, which is off of Hodge Road over there in eastern Wake County?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, when you arrive on the scene at Holden Acres, can you kind of tell us who you report to or who you find at the scene, how you find the scene?
Lieutenant Byrd, Deputy Brooks are the two that I recall being there when I got there, and we kind of performed security of the perimeter that we had at that point in time, just kind of holding in place until the rest of the SRT team got there with the Bearcat.
All right, so you arrived prior to the Bearcat arriving.
Yes, sir.
And in terms of securing the perimeter, did that just include sort of the area immediately around the houses and outbuildings there
Correct.
at Holden Acres? Okay. And in doing that, did you locate anything, or did Duke start to track anything at that point?
No, Duke was still in the car. This was just me. I was just a body out there.
All right. And you've heard testimony earlier today from Lieutenant Byrd and Deputy Manville about sort of the Bearcat arriving on the scene and then later search warrants coming to be served. Were you there throughout that entire period?
I was.
All right. And you heard some evidence possibly about, commands or alerting into the house that this was the Wake County Sheriff's Department from the Bearcat. Do you recall that?
I do.
And can you kind of describe for us how loud that was? If you felt it was able to be heard from far away.
It's loud. Somebody walking on Hodge Road could have heard it. I mean, this is also 12 o'clock at night out in the middle of the country.
Right.
So, I mean, there's not a lot of noise.
Right. Not significant road noise or.
No, these are back
area.
back secondary streets, secondary roads.
Yes, sir. And during the period of time that the Bearcat was setting up, and I guess while they were obtaining search warrants, were you just sort of on scene to assist in whatever way?
I was, yeah, just perimeter security.
And again, at that point, were y'all aware, or had you decided whether or not the defendant was even inside the residence?
No, we had no idea where the defendant might be.
Now, you noted that there are several structures in that area around the house at Holden Acres that had been identified as the defendants. And did you see, or were you aware that SRT had cleared all those structures?
I was present for all that. Yes.
Now, were you employing the use of your canine unit at that point, or Duke?
I was in the back of the Bearcat with my dog, just in case, just for apprehension purposes. If somebody may come out of the residence and took off running, then it was going to be my job to handle that situation.
All right, because in addition to tracking people, I think you also said that you and Duke were trained in apprehension. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So did the Bearcat actually move to each of these structures as they were being cleared, and you could be deployed from that if someone jumped and ran?
I believe the Bearcat stayed in one position, and the operators deployed from the back of that.
I see. Okay. And again, the area, although there's several structures, were they all within earshot of the address there? I mean, it's not a huge area.
Correct. That's kind of why the Bearcat stayed where it was. It didn't need to drive to the different areas.
All right, that's fine. Well, and again, you don't have noted that any person was located in any of these outbuildings around the residence. Is that right?
Right.
At some point, did Lieutenant Byrd make a request of you specifically?
He did.
And go ahead. Let us know
After all the residents were cleared, that's when he requested me to take my dog and search the area behind the house, including the woods, just in case suspect may have fled prior to any of our arrival.
And so I guess this request would have been made after the robot had been deployed into the house. Is that right?
Correct.
I mean, at this point, they had satisfied themselves the defendant wasn't in the house. So then your perimeter essentially expands, doesn't it?
Yes.
All right. And you're deployed with Duke to extend into the woods and attempt to locate a track and track a potential suspect out there.
Correct.
All right. Well, tell us about the track and in which direction you headed and who went with you.
It was myself, my dog, Deputy Brooks, Deputy Manville, Deputy Canoes were with me.
And they were all members of the special response team at that time?
Correct.
And what was their responsibility or their role or participation in following you and Duke in the track?
They're used as what we call cover officers, basically to cover myself and my dog, because as a handler, I'm so focused on what my dog is doing and reading my dog. A lot of times they're my eyes and ears, because I'm looking down a lot of the times.
Sure. And you would be actually leading the group.
Correct.
And they'd be providing cover behind you.
Correct. I'm just as Deputy Manville testifies, almost like a triangle, and I'm the tip of the triangle, and they spread out.
I see. So if you're the tip of the triangle, do they spread out basically three across? They're not a triangle themselves. But
No, they're
across behind you.
yeah, basically winging off of me.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, in which direction did you begin your track?
My dog started to acquire a track and show interest in an odor in the woods that were behind this residence. And I believe we entered the woods and started heading west.
All right. And so you actually were going directly into the woods. Was it a path, or were you navigating
No, it's
through the trees?
fairly thick woods behind the house. Navigating through there, tree limbs, branches.
And you also heard about the lighting apparatus and capabilities of the Bearcat there at the house at Holden Acres, but as you sort of got into the woods and away from the house, do you recall, or can you testify as to what the light was like, what your visibility was like away from that part of the scene?
In the woods, it was pretty dark in the woods. Throughout that track, we exited the woods, and I remember we had a pretty decent moon that night. So I mean, we had some good natural lighting.
Right. And again, through previous testimony, you've heard that maybe your eyes could eventually acclimate to that.
Correct.
Right. But you were also equipped with a flashlight as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
And why is that?
Just in this line of work, you're always going to have some flashlights with you. But as a handler, I mean, you're tracking people through the woods at night, all different types of environments. So you're going to have. I usually kept 2 flashlights with me.
All right. Well, let's go back to Duke's track. You said that he began tracking west in the woods, and then in which direction did he head after that? And tell us where you came out of the woods.
So we tracked west initially, and I think we started headed east, I believe, out of the woods.
All right.
Came out of the woods into a field. So west, north out of the woods into that field.
Right. And when you came out in the field, it was like an agricultural field or some farmland?
Correct.
All right. Early April, was it flat, or
It was.
where there weren't crops in it
No.
or anything like that?
No.
Right. And sort of around the perimeter of that field, do you recall a dirt path?
Yeah, I do. Yes.
Well, so you say you began to track east in the field back towards Hodge Road. Is that right?
Correct.
And then, where were you, sort of you and Duke, in relation to the woods and the wood line?
We came out of the woods, and I say we probably went 10 yards into that field, and then started tracking east, running parallel with that wood line. So 10 yards off the wood line.
And about how far did you track before you came to a bend in the wood line?
30, 40 yards.
Now, when you say bend, I mean, it's just, as you say, there's an actual bend in the path.
Correct.
And the wood line.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what you did, or how you would approach a bend? I mean, if it's bending away from you on the other side, what do you do as you're kind of moving around?
Right. So when we initially came out of the field, and I did start tracking east, with the moon and with that field, I was able to see a lot of what was in front of me. Periodically hit your flashlight, but your flashlight isn't something you keep on all the time. It will give away your position. So briefly hit it. With the light of the moon, you can see everything. When I come up to that bend in the woods, then I have a whole new line of sight becomes available, because I couldn't see anything up to that point anymore.
Sure.
So at that point, I would turn a flashlight on to see what was about to be in front of me.
And you would need to do that sort of as you came around the bend, because you were going to be exposing yourself.
Right, exactly.
And I think maybe we talked about it before. Similar to clearing a residence, when you turn a corner, you immediately sort of...
Yeah, you want to see what's in front of you, and that's basically what it is. It was like a corner in the wood line, and so when I came around it, I wanted to see what was in front of me.
So at this point, when you've come to the bend, you decide to turn on your flashlight to assist you in making visual contact with anything around there.
Correct.
All right, and in what hand are you holding the flashlight?
My right hand.
Right. And does Duke remain on a leash with you?
He does. He's on a leash that allows him to get about 20 feet in front of me.
And so you're holding the leash with your left hand, and in your right hand is a flashlight. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, the jury might have heard some testimony about a gun-mounted flashlight. Is this mounted on a gun, or is this just a handheld flashlight?
This is just a handheld flashlight.
And you're, how were you armed that night?
With a SIG 357 handgun.
And was that on your right hip?
It was.
All right. And how were you dressed?
Black BDUs.
What are BDUs?
What you saw Lieutenant Byrd wearing is similar to what I had on that night.
And so that's tactical gear?
Correct, yes.
All right. Well, once you get to the bend in the woods, or in the wood line, and you turn on your flashlight, can you tell us what you see as you come around the bend?
I see the defendant on his knees.
And where is he in relation to you when you make visual contact to him?
So my dog is 20 feet in front of me, and he's probably 15 feet in front of my dog.
So from you to him, it's about 35 feet, or a little over 10 yards.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. And in what you say he was on his knees?
He was.
In what direction is he facing?
I come up on his right-hand side, so he's looking into the woods.
And again, those woods, would he be facing southward at that point, back into the woods?
So I believe so. He'd be looking at his residence through the woods.
Sure. All right. So looking back at his residence towards the woods, and you put the flashlight on him, and what's the next thing that happens?
He immediately raises his right hand and starts shooting at me.
And did you actually see the muzzle flash?
I did.
Did you see one or more than one?
I saw two.
And what happened next?
I dropped the flashlight that I had in my right hand and kind of rolled to my left, and in that process got my gun out of my holster.
When you say rolled to your left, you sort of pushed your right.
Yeah, obviously it startled me, and then so I kind of made this motion of rolling like this so I could get my gun out of my holster, and at the same time I kind of grabbed my dog.
Did your dog react to the firing?
Oh yeah, crazy, amped up, ready to go, barking, pulling. So he was a little bit of a. It took me a second to get him under control.
Sure. And he was a 90-pound dog, and had y'all recently finished training together?
Correct. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But so as you say as you roll to your left, you're able to get your gun out.
I was, yes.
Okay, but at this point, in what direction are you?
I'm without thinking about it. I have moved myself out into that field even more, with no cover, nothing. I'm just out in the middle of an open field getting shot at.
Sure. And so then what do you do?
I start moving back to the wood line to try to get behind a tree or something to take cover, and in the meantime I'm doing that, I'm returning fire.
And now at this point, you no longer have the benefit of your flashlight. Are you still able to see the defendant at this point?
No. The only thing I remember seeing was where those muzzle flashes from the gun he was using were coming from.
And so you were essentially just firing back toward those muzzle flashes?
Firing in the shooting and moving and aiming towards the last area I saw those muzzle flashes coming from.
And eventually you were able to reach the wood line, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and you got down at that point?
I did, yeah, I went prone.
All right. And your dog was on your left side, was still with you?
Yeah, yep.
And what happens at that point?
Throughout that whole process, Deputy Manville and Deputy Brooks had moved forward, and I had ended up getting behind them. I remember Brooks calling back to me asking me if I was okay, because I actually think when everything happened, I fell down for a second. The dog pulled me down,
Right.
and they hollered back to me, "Are you okay? Have you been hit?" I didn't know. I said, "I don't know if I'm hit or not." I thought I probably was in the adrenaline rush. I just hadn't realized it yet.
Sure. Right. So there's sort of that flurry of activity, the gunshots, you moving, returning fire, and getting into the wood line, and you say you've also been pulled by the dog, and you've gotten him under control. Now, as part of your tactical gear, would you have been wearing any sort of vest?
I did. I have like a outer vest on, so it's a big carrier that the vest was on.
And when they're initially calling out to you, I guess once there's a pause in the firing, you're not sure whether or not you've been hit.
Correct.
But you feel that maybe you were based on
where
you were.
When everything kind of went quiet for a second, I saw Deputy Brooks had moved back to me to check on me, and I kind of did a brief pat down because I had made the assumption there's no way. I thought as close as I was, my dog's hit or I'm hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I heard Lieutenant Byrd mentioned like a buddy check. You
correct.
Check each other for gunshot wounds. But so after that, you found that you hadn't actually been hit.
Correct.
By gunfire. Okay. And Brooks and Manville, who had been your cover, have now moved in front of you.
Correct.
All right. Do you go to what sort of regrouping is done at this point, or what do y'all do next?
So, Lieutenant Byrd and several more members of the SRT team eventually make their way through the woods to get up to us. I kind of stayed back because I have the dog, and the dog was really amped up, barking, wanting to go. So I was really focused on trying to control him, and SRT formed a game plan as far as moving towards the defendant.
And did you help kind of provide information about where you saw the muzzle flashes and where they should be looking?
Right. Yes.
And did you hear, your colleagues return fire in the same direction
I did.
where the defendant was shooting from?
Yes.
But you can't count how many times any one gun was fired. Is that right?
No, sir.
Was everyone carrying 357s, or did people have different weapons out there? If you recall.
I don't recall.
That's fine. Your Honor, if I may approach.
Yes, sir.
Deputy Simmons, this is State's Exhibit S3. Do you recognize this aerial map that's been printed out?
Yes.
Okay. And you recognize this to be aerial footage of around the Holden Acres address?
Correct.
And you also see there maybe the path of your track and the bend where you may have encountered the defendant?
Yes.
All right. Would this aid you in illustrating your testimony as to what happened that night?
Yes.
You can stay seated right there. You're all right. I would just ask permission to publish this on the projector so you can testify.
Yes, sir. Any objection?
No, sir.
All right, it's admitted.
Bring that back. Here.
Now, Deputy Simmons, you see the area marked 3536 Holden Acres Drive, is that right?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and is that where you spent the first hour or so of your time on the scene on this evening?
Yes.
Now, when Lieutenant Byrd requested that you make a perimeter search sort of through the woods, can you tell us sort of which direction you headed in?
So if you're looking at that loop down there, we entered the woods somewhere right to the right of that where the homes are,
Yes, sir.
and started pushing up towards that field at the top of the screen. We would have come out of the woods at that top left corner,
All right, so the
right there. Yes.
okay, so that would have been in sort of, you said a westerly direction?
Yes.
And maybe a northwesterly direction?
Correct. Yes.
And again, the other three deputies that were providing you cover, that they would have followed you through the woods until you came out to that path and that clearing.
Yes.
And then you said you turned east, and so would that be moving on this screen from left to right?
Yes, it would.
And you see the path around that field, it looks like. Where would you have been sort of in relation to that path as you were tracking along the line?
To the left of it in this picture. So.
All right. And again, the other three members of the SRT, they're just fanned out behind you in a triangle.
Correct.
Now, as you go along, you see there's another field on the far right of this screen. Is that sort of the direction you were headed in?
Yes. Yes.
And can you tell us about the bend you located that that required you to put on your flashlight as you were moving around it?
Yes. If you move your cursor to the left some more, that is around that area. It's hard to tell with that aerial view.
Sure. And this aerial view might kind of depict shadows,
Correct, yes.
rather than just trees.
Right.
Okay, but so there was a bend there that you felt kind of required you to put on your flashlight so you can see your way around as you're moving through there.
Yes.
And it was around that bend where you encountered the defendant. You said on his knees, facing southward, back towards the house.
Yes.
And then he turned with his right hand and immediately began firing at you. And you said you remember 2 shots.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm next going to approach the stakes. 150, 141, and 137. Do you recognize these photographs taken that evening in the field near the woodline where the shooting took place?
I do.
All right. Would they help you illustrate your testimony?
Yes.
Pull up 150. Okay, I've put up on the projection screen what's marked State's Exhibit 150. Can you tell us sort of what we're looking at here? Is this as you're getting ready to head around that bend?
It is. It's me. That's the area approaching that.
And you said that as you were going around the bend, you were kind of on the other side of the path, away from the wood line. Is that correct?
Correct. That was more towards the field side versus the woods.
Yes, sir. But after you were fired on and you got your gun out, you kind of made your way back to the wood line.
Yeah.
And there's some placards there that are right next to the wood line. So would that be a sort of a fair assessment of where you ended up when you returned to fire and kind of held back while the rest of the SRT team went and apprehended the defendant?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Now, I want to look next at State's Exhibit 141. And again, this is sort of a blurry picture, but does this also depict the bend that you were coming around?
Yes.
All right, and you see It looks like it's eliminated from the camera person's angle, but there also seems to be a definite light shining towards the camera.
Yes.
Would that be about where you were with your flashlight as you were coming around the bend?
Yeah, that's a very accurate picture of what it would look like if you were on this end and I was on, and that was me, where that light is.
And then you see these placards kind of in the foreground. They're a little blurry, but it's C, B, and A. Where is that where you saw the defendant?
Yes, in that area.
And again, immediately upon you seeing him, he raises his right hand and fires at you.
Yes.
And then we'll go to States 137. And again, does that sort of depict where you would have found the defendant as you were coming around the bend?
Yes.
And this is just with sort of different lighting and without placards, but taken from the same direction as the previous photograph.
Correct.
And if you were, as you came upon him, you basically would have been coming around this tree or brush right here. Is that right?
Correct.
And before getting around the bend, did you hear or see, or were you aware that the defendant was going to be present right here?
No, it was not.
Okay. And Duke wasn't given any particular alerts or getting more aggressive at that point?
No.
Okay, so were you wholly taken by surprise when this happened?
Yes.
Deputy Simmons, you were obviously after the defendant was apprehended, did other, I guess, folks from the sheriff's department or EMS want to check you and all of the other members of SRT, you know, for potential injuries, whether gunshot related or simply from, you know, taking a spill in the woods or it's, you know, something of that nature?
Yes.
Okay. And did you go and just get checked out by EMS?
If I do, I don't remember them putting their hands on me, checking me out.